What's up, everyone? So we're actually in the guts of the building where the magic happens. This is our buddy Gary Thielman. And Gary, you go way back with Harisson.
I go way back. I go 40 years back. It's 40 years this year for me.
So you've given a lot of your life to this.
A lot of blood, sweat, and time and effort, yeah.
Well, that's very cool. There's a lot of history to talk about. A lot of history. This is the newest, though. Yeah. So we're going to go from one extreme to the other here today. This is the 32 Classic, correct?
This is the 32 Classic. This console we developed over the last few years, and we launched it last fall at the AES show. So far, it's been going really good. You saw it the first time at NAMM out in L.A.
I did. I'm anxious to come in someday and bring in some tracks and get my hands dirty on it.
We kind of took some of the elements from the original Harisson console and fast-forwarded that 50 years and designed a new analog console based on that. Some changes here and there, some changes in how the console works, but some of the circuitry design and everything we pulled forward.
When I first came to Nashville, rooms had the Neve VRs, some vintage Neves, SSL 4000s, some 9000s were making it in. I remember an Atari here and there. But that era of, because, the guys that were older than me, for example, that had been in town longer than me, were talking about the era of Harisson and Neve and MCI and names like that I actually didn't get to work on. Yeah. And because, a lot of them were gone by the time I came to town. So seeing this full circle, we'll call it, of history where this is reborn and revived, because there's a lot of great records made on those desks.
Wow, huge records. Harisson started in 75, so the very first 3 consoles that were made went here in town at Sound Emporium. So all 3 rooms over at Sound Emporium had the Harisson consoles to start. So, Johnny Cash and Kenny Rogers and just on and on and on. They tracked a lot of stuff. They're very successful here in Nashville, but also all over the world. At that time, there was not that many commercially available large format
This
consoles.
Was before SSL had brought out.
Before SSL, it was kind of, everybody was doing bespoke stuff, making one-off things. It was difficult for studio designers and so on to have something that they could turnkey into studios, and Harisson decided to do that. And that's where the console came from. So from about 1975 to about 1983, it was a 7 or 8 year period of time where all over the world, 300 or 400 of these consoles were put in studios everywhere. And during that time, if you were making records, there's a very good chance that it was done using a Harisson console. Queen and Led Zeppelin and Fleetwood Mac and Steely Dan and just on and on. ABBA and just
Supertramp.
Supertramp made that Breakfast in America album at out in L.A. and wow, there was a lot going on at that time.
I was doing a little homework this morning, and a favorite song of mine from the 80s, it's just been one of those that has stuck with me. Adam Ant, Goody Two Shoes. It's like, I remember back then just this being this bombastic, massive sounding record, and I guess these preamps would have been part of that sound.
Those preamps, those EQs, that whole thing. And I didn't know that either. There was so many consoles back then, it was hard to know. And it wasn't like today. There was no instant knowledge of what was going on. So it's really hard to know.
One fun thing for me about when you hear some interviews with some of these historic figures and what it was like to work in, commercial rooms that hits were being made through that era before, people like you guys would have really infiltrated the business, was these what you call one-offs of consoles and homemade consoles. Yeah. You hear Bob Clearmountain talk about those desks at what studio would that have been in that era of Bob's career? But talking about how bad they were, and it was just a common thing because there wasn't the I wouldn't call it mass produced, but the consoles that were made and really perfected and then repeated, and then repeated. It's like, okay, we're
better
on. Exactly. Exactly.
That just didn't happen.
Right. Yeah. And hearing stories about how bad they sounded and what it was like to work around the poor performance of the console.
Yeah.
To get the record, that they wanted out of it before you guys came in.
There was that, but there was also some good parts about that too, because oftentimes they would make a bespoke something for a specific room, and it all kind of became its own thing. So there's some examples.
Some good and bad history.
Some good and bad history, and more importantly, it was availability. That was really the problem. If you wanted a console, and you went to somebody who was making a bespoke console, it might take you a year to get it. Even now, with some manufacturers, you go and get it, and a year later, you might have it. That's always kind of been an issue because they're big, they're expensive, they're hard to build. And ourselves, SSL, we kind of figured out how to do that on a larger scale and getting away from the bespoke nature of mixing consoles. And it took a long time for that to happen.
Yeah, understood. Now, speaking of SSL, that would have been one of your major competitors at one time.
It was. Well, there was a real interesting period of time. They came on the scene and they had a technology that was very interesting for music studios. We did not. Harisson did not. This was, after that first 8-year period of time. And
early 80s?
Early 80s, yeah. I would say 82, 83. They really started to infiltrate the music studio side of things. They had this total recall thing. It was pretty cool. It was what it was for the time. We decided we were going to try and one-up that. We were working on some really cool digitally controlled analog technology that would really let you reset a console instantly, the whole thing. Come to find out, the music studios really weren't very excited about that.
But I know why.
Yeah, I know why. They learned how to bill hours for that total recall. And, doing something in a second that they could bill 2 hours for was just something that they weren't interested
Fleetwood
in.
Mac, for example, had budgets that would allow them to come. Yeah. It's
part of that budget was recall. And I totally get it. It was part of the business model for the studios. And we just didn't fit into that with something. It was new, it was fast, it was just a little bit different. And it was not a good fit for music studios.
Yeah.
However, that technology was a great fit for film post-production studios. And there was a split right then. SSL kind of took over that music industry, and we went off into the film business, into the large format bespoke. It's funny. That became a bespoke console business.
Yeah.
We tried to get away from that early on, and we ended up doing that for a very long time, making very large format consoles.
That would have been massive.
Really big
desks.
consoles. The biggest consoles that have ever been made. Some of those were 33, 35 feet long, 3-4 guys working them, hundreds and hundreds of channels of processing. And we did that for a long time. We spent almost 3 decades doing that work out in Hollywood. And, we wouldn't be here today had we not gone through that. So the technology found a home, just didn't find a home in music studios. And so oftentimes people think we just went away. And
right.
We kind of did. We went away from music studios, but we certainly didn't go away. And the technology and some of the things we've done over the last 30 years are pretty cool. But it's why we're able to come back and kind of go full circle.
Get back into the music
Get back into, kind of go and rebirth, where we came from. Our roots were in the music business, and particularly here in Nashville. I mean, that's where it started. We've been here the whole time.
Well, you have a whole generation of engineers that are going to be like, oh man, it's back. They never stopped. For example, I believe Great River years ago started making this 500 series. I still see them around town.
Yeah,
I still see them around town.
Very successful.
Yeah,
there was a time when the guys that some of the resellers were telling me it was the best-selling 500 series module they ever had was that EQ.
Universal Audio has copied it in software form.
Yeah.
I believe IK Multimedia may have a version of it. I don't remember. There's a couple different companies that have your
the ones who've done it legally really are Universal Audio.
Okay. Okay, got you.
And from there, it kind of stopped. And I don't know what other people are doing.
So you have this whole generation of user that's excited to see it, back and revived. And then we're going to have a lot of viewers out there that only know you guys from software. They're probably going to watch this and be like, what? Fleetwood Mac recorded on those consoles? I only knew about the software. Yeah. Because I remember when the Harisson Mixbus came out.
Yeah, well, it's a good story there. We were making these big film consoles, and that industry changed a lot. Once digital audio workstations came to be, the days of those big, huge consoles were numbered. And it went away, and we saw that coming. I mean, we're not silly. We're looking out there wondering what are we going to do. We had a lot of IP. We were making digital consoles, a lot of software development, a lot of DSP development, and Ben, who you'll talk to a little bit later, we sat down and tried to figure out how to spread this out, how to make that a little bit wider. And we had the idea, we talked about making plugins and things, and we decided to make a DAW. And it was a pretty bold step, but we were still selling consoles. It was a pretty safe step forward, and Ben put a lot of blood and sweat and tears into that, and we launched that product, and that's been 15 years ago now. That was
time flies.
2009. When we launched the very first version of Mixbus. We later came out with a second version, and then we started taking all that DSP stuff and started making plugins, and we have, 40 or 50 products now, software products that have come about over the last 15 years and are really good for us. And that's how we can get wide to people who maybe don't know about where that came from and what the real legacy and the history of the company is. So we have these two kind of weird juxtapositioned situations going on. And that's what really led us back into the analog world, because that software really started to get us back into music studios. The natural flow of that is, if you really want to be in that game, you need some hardware too. You need not only the software, but we needed this analog console. We came out with some 500 series modules, all those kind of things feeding back into the music studio business. If you're going to be there, we felt like we need to be there at the highest level, and with some really nice flagship stuff and some nice complementary software products.
Well, I'm thinking a lot of our viewers out there that are of a certain demographic, in age down, know of you, the software, and especially in the last couple of years from in the last year, I guess it would be, of teaming up with SSL and having your products, software products, together in bundles and various things, which it leads me to basically say that everything has kind of come from full circle. You guys dominated the studio industry at one time. Then they kind of dominated the studio industry, but you're in different lanes, but still in business. And then you got evolved kind of in a similar way, getting into software and things like that. But now you guys have actually joined forces.
Yeah.
So you and Solid State Logic are working side by side to just further the company, further everything. And I think it's actually really awesome.
It is. It's a little weird for us. For me in particular, I lived that whole SSL Harisson thing. But now, we're so similar. They, to be frank, we're quite a bit larger than us. Their reach is big.
Oh, absolutely.
Very, very big.
Which is good for you.
In areas that we just didn't have a reach. We had a reach in a different area. They have this reach, and which is really good. And so the bundling of products, this is just a natural thing. It allows both of us to tap into each other's, whatever those reaches are. You're going to see some things coming in the newest version of the software, which are pretty cool, that are clearly SSL Harisson teaming up and doing things, and the resources and just the whole vibe. This is a group of guys that makes exactly the same kind of products that we do.
Yeah.
And they know how to do it. We know how to do it. We have this British thing and this American thing, and it's cool. It's really good. We've spent the last year working with them, and it's really nice. And we have a really nice roadmap.
Nice.
Looking forward to.
I love it. So when you think of SSL consoles, now I know their preamp technology has been changing a little bit, but you have the chip-based preamp in large part up until recent years. When you guys now you have the Jensen transformer preamp.
Yeah.
So it's like you have the best of both worlds coming together. So you have these different flavors. It's that British thing. It's that British American thing, and they're very successful with what they've done over the years. And people like that. They like that sound. They've integrated it into their workflows and everything. Yeah.
We, on the other hand, we had a very clean and natural sounding thing from the beginning. That's what people wanted. They wanted it perfect. We were trying, in the early days, trying to make really digital consoles out of analog circuitry, trying to get it as clean and as pristine as possible. And that's what we focused on. And it's just two not that their stuff isn't clean and doesn't sound good, it's just two different approaches to circuit design. They never had a transformer in a console.
Right.
They just never have. It's just not something they ever did. So they made that choice and they ran with it and were very successful. We did it the other way. We did a lot of things differently than that. And it comes out in the product. They just sound different. Not better or worse. They're just two different choices.
Well, I'm sure the transformerless technology that they ran with through the 80s wasn't, when you guys were around in the 70s, that probably wasn't even there.
Well, it did. We made it.
Oh, okay.
And there's an interesting story there. Early on, transformers were not very good. I mean, we designed them out. We didn't want them in the console. In fact, the people buying the consoles didn't want them. They were inconsistent from one to the next. Very difficult to design that into something where you had to repeat something accurately 32 times in a console. Very hard to do. And, bless his heart, Dave Harisson, he wanted those out of there. And he spent years perfecting electronically balanced circuit design and got very, very good at that. So we designed those. They were in the very first consoles. And within about 5 years, they were out of those consoles.
Oh. Okay.
And that's an interesting side note. So, and that's probably why SSL chose not to go ahead and do that from the beginning, because it just wasn't very good.
Well, I got it.
And neither did we. I mean, we went for many, many years without putting transformers in anything. Mm-hmm. Until much later, and then in this console, now, fast forward 50 years, transformer technology is really good.
Yeah.
These transformers in here are not like they were 50 years ago, and to put them in here now became viable. It's a little bit expensive, but they're really good. And so we decided, okay, let's do that. We originally wanted to do that. They weren't very good, so we designed them out. Okay, fast forward some time, we'll put them in, and we'll make everything a little bit. We'll go right back to the very beginning because we can.
Well, and the medium, you got to remember what we're recording to is entirely different. Yeah. So at one time, the tape had such a sound, rounding of transients and whatnot, that to some degree, the transformers do as well. So now we're recording to a beautifully transparent digital medium. So now we love what transformers do.
Exactly. Maybe not quite as necessary back then, based on what was on the other end. Yeah. Versus now what's on the other end. And you kind of want that in there somewhere. Yeah. And
real tubes and real transformers.
It's a thing. So we put them in. They're on the inputs. They're on the output of this console. You can switch that in and out so you can hear it with and without.
So your consoles, for example, SSL, of course, they have a variety of products, but this is meant for a tracking room.
This is really meant for recording. Yeah, and really made for that. It's a split inline design. One very cool thing about this is we built the converters are built into it, and there's a Dante interface to this console.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, this is very interesting. So really, what you're seeing here is a really large, really nice interface. Oh. And so the way it works is, you pick a source, a microphone, or whatever you got coming in. That feeds straight out of direct out via Dante over to the DAW. The return comes back in through the fader. You monitor it, and it's really a large format computer interface. Made for recording.
Gotcha. So up here we have our our Jensen transformer. Yep. Which is that's a big selling point.
It is a very big selling point. These beautiful faders that we put in here are a huge selling point. It's as good. It's as good as you can buy. You cannot buy a better fader than that. So we spared no expense, and that's what we did. That's what we've always done. We never really.
How many aux sins do we have?
There's 4 mono sins and a stereo cue. You have the preamp input. You have a line input, and then you have a Dante input that comes back from the Dante network
for mixing back.
Yeah, for mixing back or playback. Any. It's just a source to the channel strip. You got the 4-band classic Harisson 32 series parametric EQ with the proportional cues on there. They're really nice, really wide filters. One
of the things you guys are most known for, these EQs. Yeah, absolutely.
They're really good. It's a, I don't want to say unique, but it is a kind of a unique design.
I think it is.
The cue changes with relative to the gain on the band. That's really cool. And it's very musical, and people really like them. They sound great. And
even large cuts and boosts sound good.
Very, very usable. They sound great on all kinds of different stuff. And that was a real goal back in the day. You just had one console, and it had to record and do everything.
Yeah.
So whether it was a vocal or a drum or a guitar or whatever it was, you needed the tool. You didn't have plugins. They didn't have racks and racks of output. It just didn't exist. It was this.
Right.
And it needed to cover a wide range of uses. So that design, painstaking, I can't even tell you how, that didn't just drop out of the sky. That was really researched and meticulously finding the correct parts and the tolerances and the frequency ranges and all those things to make it so that it could be used across a wide range of things. So we just brought that forward. It's really the same kind of EQ. The filters are beautiful. They're really wide. You can actually cancel the signal out.
High and low pass.
High and low pass. When you do them to the full side, it will cancel the signal.
Nice,
They're
very
really
nice.
usable.
Tell me about your busing. So consoles are back.
Yeah.
I mean, they are hot again.
That's why we made it.
Exactly. But for people that's wanting to use it as a summing mixer, and to some degree in recording studios as well, the busing.
Yeah.
So we can have our subgroups.
This is really important. This is the difference between what we made 50 years ago and what we made now. 50 years ago, you had a big row of switches up here that fed a 24 or a 32-track analog tape machine.
Right.
And that's about as, you push the button and out it went. It was not very flexible in terms of audio grouping, doing parallel processing, for example. All those kind of things people do today. So that's the part that we really changed in the console. So this busing structure is really, really nice. The way it works is there are 8 buses, and the master faders for those are here. And there's the main stereo output. So any channel, you can send the signal directly to the stereo output or to any of the 8 buses. And you can do that simultaneously or independently. This is really critical, because what people want to do now is they want to do parallel stuff. They want to have a clean signal going maybe directly to the stereo output. They want to create another subgroup, hang a compressor off of there or hang some kind of processing off of there, and blend those two things together.
Absolutely.
It's a very common way of working now. And that's exactly what you can do here. So on this channel, for example, I've got it routed straight to the stereo bus. I can pan it left and right. And then I can come up here and I can say, okay, well, I want to create another stereo bus. Maybe I'll use 1 and 2. I also want it to follow this pan. And now I've got it here. There's an insert point. I can hang a compressor. I can hang a piece of processing off of there. And I can send that back to the main mix. And now you've got both. I've got the original source going there directly, and also summed with it is whatever that parallel. And I'm in parallel. I can blend these two things together out there, and you can do that 4 times.
So we can bring up our hyper drum crush.
Exactly, drum crush, guitar whammy, whatever you are doing, and you can print any of that. All of those outputs go to that Dante network. So they're feeding the DAW. So you can create your tracks over there, and you can very easily and very quickly blend, mix, control, and get them out.
Are there insert points across the? Perfect. Yeah. So if we wanted to sum all of our vocals to here and come in with a compressor on it.
Some kind of compressor on there, boom, you got them. I send them straight to the mix. Maybe I have the originals here, also going here, and now I'm blending all that stuff together in a
very cool.
And that is completely different than how that original console worked.
Very nice.
And made for today. This is what people want to do. When I show people that, they get it. They go, this is exactly what I want to do. And not only that, this is a really easy console to learn how to use. There's almost no learning curve. If you've used an 8-bus console, which just about everybody on the planet has, between Soundcraft and Mackie and everybody along the way who used that kind of a console. This is really an exploded version of that, but very, very easy to get your head around. There's no complicated statuses. It's very straightforward.
And this is also available in a 48-channel version.
It is. We'll also do custom versions of it if necessary. We haven't done that yet, but we can. I mean, it's just
I'm sure
just working.
Yeah,
it's time and money. It's time and money. That's what it is. But yeah, this is the base model, 32 channels, all the output stuff. One other really key element, and you'll get into this a little bit more when we start talking about software, but this console has a 12-wide monitoring module in it. So this speaker level is driving 12 speakers. So if you're doing a 7.1.4 Atmos mix, and you render that file in the DAW, and you bring it back via Dante, and you hit this little Dante button up here, and that monitor, you can listen to your 7.1.4 without having some kind of little monitor dongle hanging off the console. You can just do it straight through the console. It's very cool. You can monitor out a near-field pair of speakers, the stereo source, and you can monitor out the
That's very clever.
Monitor feed. So
well done.
It's not really made to mix in Atmos. You're going to typically do that in the box anyway. You're going to render that thing down to a 12.1.4. But you got to be able to hear it.
Yeah.
And that can be tricky. Yeah. I mean, that can be tricky. So we built it in.
Very clever.
To the console. So this is controlling 12 speaker outputs.
Now, I don't necessarily have the budget to put one of these in my room this year. However, one thing I have been eyeballing is you guys are back on, you're in the 500 series game.
Yeah, these we launched at NAMM, and they're on the shelves now, so you can buy them at choose your favorite outlet.
So have a preamp.
Yep, you have a preamp. That preamp is exactly this preamp.
So it's a Jensen transformer.
It is the same preamp that's in this console. It has the high pass and low pass filters on there. Also, the exact same circuitry that's in the console. So that is a direct copy of what's going on here. So you get a small version of what's happening in this console.
Very cool.
It's got a front panel XLR and a instrument input, so you can plug a guitar in or a mic directly in the front.
A pad for hot sources, phase reverse,
all the
what
stuff
we'd expect. Yeah, the normal.
In out for the filters, which is nice, so you can A/B whether.
Now I did a little homework, and the EQ that's here was a same analog guts. Let's say it, but it was from a different era of consoles.
It was the next era after this original console. Couple of things. The 4-band EQ is really nice. Some people it can be tricky to handle, particularly in the mid-range. So we kind of simplified that in some of the later consoles, and that's what we put in this.
So it's a 3-band.
It's a 3-band EQ. And there's another big reason. It's very difficult to get 10 knobs and 4 switches in that form factor. So we kind of were fighting a physical battle.
Just limitation of size.
Yeah, limitation of size. And then we wanted to make a really nice EQ. And we have lots of EQ designs, so we chose that one. So it's got a high and a low band that are very similar to here. The frequency ranges are a little bit wider because it's just a 3-band EQ. The mid band is quite different. All the bands on the console are proportional Q, so the Q changes relative to the boost and cut. But on this mid band, we put a variable Q on there, so it's not proportional. It's you can dial in the Q, and only on the mid band because that's really where. Oh, sure. It's really where people are trying to do most of the surgery. Yeah. The high and the low bands are by default shelving, and then there's a bell. You can switch it to bell, but very common is a shelf on the high and the low, and then a real flexible mid band EQ and a high pass filter. There's no low pass filter on there. That's low pass filter, kind of a luxury. So we
and you also have a compressor.
We have a compressor. We never really were famous for compressors. The original consoles never had compressors in them. It was something that we just didn't do in the 70s, late 70s. Compressors just weren't a thing. Right. Yeah. So we just didn't do them. Later on, we made some compressors for different reasons. We made broadcast consoles and some other things where they really became necessary. Not a tweaky thing, but a real functional thing. And we thought maybe we'd try and get into this. Compressors now are really a thing. Oh gosh, yeah. And we have, it's something we did 30 years ago. We pulled it out of the history, and we'll try and dip our toes in the compressor market. And actually, it's been very successful.
Nice.
They're really nice. They sound good. It's a VCA based compressor. Very simple, more of a leveling type tool.
Yeah, very cool.
And they're great. You can't get them to pump. They sound great. They turn out really good, and they're moving off the shelves, which is maybe the most important thing.
Absolutely.
So, right out of the gate.
Keep these lights on.
Yeah, right out of the gate. These have been pretty successful. So we're very happy.
I'm really impressed with this. I have a friend who is building out a studio in the next year, and this is. I gave him 2 options for the consoles. I was like, these are the ones you need to look at. So hopefully you're hearing from him in about 6 or 8 months.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I know I'm going to be working there a lot, and I want to work on it.
A couple other highlights, things that now I've been showing this for quite a lot over the last 6 months, and it's a really solid piece of gear. So when people come up to the console, the first thing they do is they lean on it.
Yeah,
they go like this.
Doing
it, and you just don't want it to move.
Right.
So it's heavy. It weighs 450 pounds. It's a beast. But this bolster is really nice.
But that's what we want.
You got to have a place for. I took the keyboard and the mouse away, but you got to have a place for that.
Yeah.
Phones, laptops, tablets, just you can eat lunch, you can take a nap on here.
If your coffee spills, it's gonna
And
I feel that little gap.
And speaking of coffee, the top, we wanted to have a flat top so you could put near-field monitors in, but for years we never did a flat top, and coffee's the reason. People will set stuff on a flat top, and it will go in the console.
I have seen it.
So what we did here, we dropped this down 2.5 inches. So nobody will set a cup of coffee here. That's hopefully. If they do, you can't fix that. But we dropped it down, and then we can have a flat top here. And mostly, you're going to have a riser for your near fields. It'll get it right up to that lip, and you can see how this works. And it turned out really nice. Yeah. And you can set. I had 150 pounds of PMC monitors sitting on here last week, and no problem. So those are some things that you might not think about right out of the gate, but very, very useful. And it's the details sometimes that can make the difference. One other detail, we have this really cool, talking about that combo jack up there. We put a combo jack in a preamp in the middle of this console. So if you're sitting in a control room, Nathan comes in, he wants to noodle on his bass. How do I get it in here? Well, you just plug it into this jack.
Oh, nice.
And then you can do a couple of different things. One, you can just dump it straight into the mix and you can hear it. Done. You don't have to fiddle around with a patch bay or climb under the console to figure out how to get the instrument in there. The other thing that happens is it feeds a bus that goes all the way across the console, and you can pick that signal up on any one of these or any of these input channels. It's kind of cool. So if you want to get it into your mix, you say, I'm not using channel 32 here. I'll just pick that up, get it on a fader. I got the EQ. I can do anything I want to it. Or you can pick it up on multiple channels, which is pretty cool. So
parallel processing.
I've had guitar players say, "Oh, wow! You mean I can plug my guitar in here and I can bring it in on 12 different channels and have a different thing on each one? I can mix them together. I can drop them in." This is very, very interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
So that's kind of a cool feature. And also, in addition to all the 32 channels, there's a separate 32 in by 2 out summing matrix in here. So if you want to bring stems back or keyboards back, or it's just a separate summing matrix that sums into the center, and you can get it down into the mix. So getting 64 signals in here for doing stuff with is possible.
Yeah, very cool.
So a lot of hidden details on what is overall a pretty straightforward, simple console design.
Very cool. Well, let's. I know there's rooms beyond where we walked in the door, and this is like the first thing we come to.
Yeah, we don't have a huge facility here. One thing to remember: this is an R&D and a prototyping.
So the manufacturing is off-site.
Yeah, we don't manufacture anything here. So this is all engineering stuff, and we have a little demo room. And Nathan here. This is Nathan's cockpit for doing product videos. So we're doing a lot of social media stuff. We make a lot of plugins and new releases of software. And so he's not only part of the customer service crew, but he's doing a lot of content in here. So we use this room to shoot video and to do that kind of stuff as well.
So Nathan McFarland. Nathan, you and I have actually met and know each other beyond this tour. Well, first of all, let me just say that some of our followers and friends out there may be seeing this backdrop and think, I've seen that before. So if they're going to look at a video of a new Harisson product or how to use it, walk through whatever, and this is the backdrop then, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It goes through different iterations. I mean, there could be a TV here, there could be guitars laying around, microphones set up. We're getting an Atmos mix set up in here, like the different Atmos speakers, so we can test the software and all that. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, but this is in some form or another. This is the spot. This is the spot. Well, that's cool.
This is the creation station, as I call it.
Very cool. I like the parquet, actually.
Yeah.
That's cool. Treasure Isle, the tracking room I work from a lot, we had that. Now they just pulled it up from water damage, so I'm going to miss it. But now you have a connection to the room where I track as well, as I recall.
Right. So I went to MTSU and graduated in 04. And the spring of 04, I looked through the yellow pages, back when we had yellow pages, Facebook and all this stuff. That's a phone book, right? And I was calling all these studios trying to find an internship somewhere. Eventually, I made it to Treasure Isle and interned there.
Another interesting personal connection. I was looking for a used Les Paul of a certain type.
Yeah.
And I messaged a guy on Facebook Marketplace and bought it. And it turns out it was you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I might have a few guitars, in my disposal. So
well, we just keep having connections. Here we are again today.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for showing us around your now. What'd you call it? The creation station.
Yeah.
All right. So on new Harisson product videos, they will know the guy and they'll know the room.
And we're also good friends with Kevin Ward. He does a lot of stuff here in town. He's a Harisson fanboy and ambassador and.
And a great person.
Yeah.
Great human being. Makes me want to be better. Well, great to see you again, buddy. Thanks for showing us around. All right. So this facility is I think you mentioned earlier, mostly research and development.
It is.
It's where you
research and development. The only building we will do would be prototype stuff.
Gotcha.
Once we get to that point, everything pretty much leaves this building and then is brought into the mothership of resources, which is manufacturing, distribution, marketing, all those kind of things. We collaborate with them, but the work is actually done outside here. So that console is built in Oxford at the SSL factory.
Nice.
Along with the 500 series modules are built where their 500 series modules are built and so on. So we're piggybacking off of that whole infrastructure, which is awesome.
Yeah. that would be.
Yeah. So I got about 3,500 square feet here that we can't really build anything in here, even if we wanted to.
Yeah.
So, we discussed it. But to really manufacture stuff, we would have really had to ramp up in a different direction. Mm-hmm. And we decided to just use the resources we have and really concentrate on what we do best, which is design. Bringing a product to the table and bringing a product to market are two quite different things. So we're very good at the first thing. We weren't very good at the second thing for a long time.
Right.
Now we are.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of how that works. So.
Well, one thing that I like, I've always been a fan of going into tech shops and things like that and seeing the wall of all the modules. Yeah. So we have kind of, it looks to me.
It looks messy, but there is a rhyme or reason.
I think it looks awesome. So to me, this is probably a documentary of the history of your company.
Yeah, it kind of is. Not in any particular. A couple of tech awards here, which are interesting. So we've won a few awards over the years. This is the very first console. This is that original console that Dave Harisson built. This is the only module that actually in the building exists.
Wow.
From that console. So
let's pick that up.
You can pick it up and have a look. You'll notice that there is a transformer on there. Look at that.
Oh yeah.
So that was one of the few that actually had that transformer on.
I like how the aux is Echo 1 and Echo 2.
Yeah, Echo. All they had was either rooms or plates.
Right here, Echo 1 and Echo 2.
Yeah. No digital stuff or
so
anything like
there's that EQ though.
There's that EQ. So it's exactly the same.
Yeah. That's been with the company.
Knobs are the same color and everything. So
and like you was, the old consoles, you were told at what tape
Yep.
You were sending to track 16 on the tape machine.
There you go.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So what year would this have been from?
That was in 1975. So the very first console went to the Sound Emporium here in town in probably in the December of 75, maybe early 76, but right in that period of time.
Very, very cool.
And then the explosion happened. Then then that company became real.
Yeah.
And we started mass producing.
We keep lovingly referring to Dave Harisson. Dave, you worked for him side by side at one time.
I worked with him for a long time.
But now he did pass away.
He passed away in 97. He was young and had some health issues, and we lost him, unfortunately. At that time, he was already not part of the company, but a good resource and a mentor and all that kind of thing. I worked with David side by side for almost 10 years. And
kind of a genius in some ways, right?
He was self-taught. He was not a degreed engineer. He was a radio guy, a ham radio guy, and a kind of a tinkerer. And he had figured out electronics, audio electronics, and he figured out how to write software, and he taught himself all of those kind of things. It's kind of interesting.
That is amazing.
Yeah, so through the years, this stuff is all circa early 80s, mid 80s, early 90s. These are kind of cool. We have a U.S. patent on these motorized joysticks. This we put into film consoles, and very unique. You could pan the signal around the room, and then it was automated, so when you played it back, that joystick moved and show you where it is.
Oh, wow.
And then you could touch it and automate it, and it worked just like a motorized fader, but in 2 dimensions, which is kind of cool. So that we put in film consoles for years and years and years.
You guys had a bunch of consoles with Sony, right? Sony Pictures at one time.
Yeah, that picture I showed you, that's the very first one. They've had, I don't know how many consoles. They've been a really good customer for 30 years. They still have those big consoles in probably 6 or 7 of the big theaters out there.
Culver City?
In Culver City. And Universal Studios and Warner Brothers and Fox and Todd A.O. We did all kinds of stuff.
That's very cool.
It was really cool.
Ready?
We're going through time here into the 80s. Here's a rack of stuff that from the late 70s before the craze of 500 series modules.
Yeah.
But this is not a 500 series form factor, so it's kind of a product that never made it to reality. But there it is. It's the only one in the world right there sitting here.
That's fun.
Digitally controlled analog, big thing. We would not be standing here had we not developed this back in the very early to mid 80s. In fact, when I first started here in 84, this is what I worked with David on. This is all digitally controlled. There's 2 little computers on here controlling the EQs and all the busing and the routing and the sends. And this is how we could recall a console in a video frame, because everything was controlled instantly with computer and with software.
Okay,
and this was very new in 84, 85. It was, and when I was talking about having a better way to do recall and it not fitting in this is what I was talking about.
So what we think, a lot of us audio engineers, that we think of bringing up an image on a computer and hand turning the EQ on channel 6
till it matches,
then moving until it's a 7. So you're saying,
I'm saying this, you just went in and you just pushed a button and everything reset in less than a second. I mean, it was instantaneous. So all the EQs, all the sends, all the routing, all the level controls, everything on the console would recall.
Which would have been that would have been film production's heaven, right?
Well, that's exactly right. Even though the music studios weren't so interested in that technology, the film guys had to have it. I mean, it's really what they needed. And they didn't need it where you plugged modules into a frame because they wanted 300 channels, and we couldn't build consoles that big. So we had to do something very clever, which is called remote control.
Right.
Something that you got to remember, this was in 85, 84, 85. Nobody was doing this.
Right.
So we were separating the signal processing from the knobs and the switches, and that's what this stuff is. This is one channel of this large film console over here, which would plug into a rack back in a machine room, and you can't imagine how big those racks were. There would have been 5 7-foot racks that held 64 of these in each one.
Wow.
So 340 channels in 5 7-foot racks in a machine room,
But
all being controlled from that large control surface. Here's the EQ and all the busing and the routing, all digitally controlled.
doing things
stuff.
that were never possible.
They just
before.
weren't
Revolutionary.
possible. And they needed it because they're back to back and work. Those facilities run 24 hours a day. So,
yeah.
And they needed to be able to go from one to the next. While they're changing reels on the projectors, they could reset the entire room and do a completely different project back to back. And they absolutely needed it. And they bought it. I mean, they bought it, and we made it, and we spent the next 3 decades doing that work. It's pretty cool.
So that is something that glossed by me. I didn't know about that part of the industry.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. The audio industry in general is wide. There's a lot. There's a lot going on outside of music studios, and we just went to a niche that was exactly what the technology was working on. They needed that, and we supplied it, and we worked it for a long, long time.
Very cool.
And we're very successful.
I had no idea that this level of automation existed back that far. I didn't know that.
Well,
you would have had to have done it with very few knobs.
So the way this worked, and this is another reason why people, they would wrinkle their forehead when they'd walk up to this console and go, "Oh, there's only 5 knobs on this console. What's going on here?" Well, these 3 knobs, you got to remember, this is in 1985.
Yeah.
So what are these 3 knobs doing? Well, they can do pan, left, right, front, back, and divergence. A high pass filter, that's the middle one, or a high EQ, level, frequency, and bandwidth. Mid-band EQs, low EQ. You just tell it. You tell it what you're just telling these knobs what you're doing. Very simple, but very foreign in 1985. This was something that I spent a lot of time teaching people how to use this console because it just was so different. And then there was motorized faders on it. Those were very new at the time. Mm-hmm. Everything was recallable and resettable and automated. And it was, we were checking boxes that people didn't even know they needed.
Right.
And so, when you're pioneering stuff, it can be hard. I mean, it was really hard. And the film guys really helped us out.
That's awesome.
Because they embraced it. They didn't care if they had to learn how to use it because they're smart people.
Yeah.
And they were willing to do that. And so that was much different than trying to convince somebody to buy something for a commercial music studio when nobody knew how to use it, when it wasn't checking any boxes.
Right.
Versus dealing with companies that needed it, wanted it, bought it, and didn't care. They wanted to know. They had to know because they were integrating it into their workflow. So it's a huge mental difference. So when I started working here, this is what Dave was working on. It's why they hired me, quite frankly. When I was right out of college, I was a young kid. I didn't know anything. I'd moved to Nashville, and I'm hanging around applying for jobs. And they called me and said, David he needed a bench rat. He needed somebody to sit with him in the lab. They're building consoles, and he's working on this stuff. And there comes a time when that has to get moved into making products out of it. I just talked about it with what we're doing now.
Yeah.
We research and develop, and it's just a lab here. Once you prototype that product, then it's got to go to a whole different...
Yeah.
So we had all that stuff. We made the consoles, but that process still needed to happen.
Sure.
So I was the guy he whipped. He wanted somebody green, somebody who didn't have any preconceived notions. He was working on this stuff. He needed work done.
Yeah.
And he needed that transition from out of his head, off the bench, into reality. And I helped do that. And that's why I started working here. And I learned a lot from him and worked side by side with him for a long time.
It's fascinating to me. That was just something that I didn't know about.
It's why we veered away from the music industry.
I get it.
We would have loved to stay in the music. We wanted that to be in the music. It was the whole company. That's what we were.
Yeah.
And it was like a slap in the face. It was like, why aren't you embracing this?
Yeah.
And, slowly you realize that maybe you're a little bit too far ahead of the game.
I get it.
Which was really kind of the case because the really forward-thinking people, the people doing industrial audio out in Hollywood, they're thinking about what are we going to be doing 10 years from now, and how is this industry going to evolve, and what kind of technologies do we need to invest in, which is a different mindset than where the music studio guys
I understand. Now this one is encapsulated, so I'm assuming that's an important part of history.
It is. This is the transition piece. When Dave wanted to do automated consoles, his first attempt was instead of using digitally controlled attenuation and MDACs and microprocessors, he was using VCAs. And so this is nothing but a huge batch of VCAs being controlled by a microcontroller and knobs. That console never made it to market. We built a prototype.
That looks like a Harisson, though.
It is.
I mean,
it is all Harisson. The important part is the inside of it, though.
Yeah.
Which was unbuildable,
gotcha.
Unmanufacturable. It was hot. There's so many issues with it that it just kind of got put on the shelf. And in reality, it was a research project. And he was waiting for this technology.
Okay, I see.
He knew that was coming. He knew eventually there'd be a better way of controlling levels with microprocessors, and it wasn't long. This came about in about 81 or 82, and in 85 we were doing that. So there was not a very long period of time when technology was moving fast.
Yeah.
And Motorola and TI and some of these companies were really making it fast advancements in how you controlled things, and how you, the whole world of software and microcontrollers and things was just burgeoning. And so we were on the bleeding edge of that, actually, and trying to bring that into an industry that just really wasn't ready.
Yeah, I get it.
For it. Not an industry, but a segment of the industry that really wasn't ready for it.
I know what you mean. Now, what's this little guy right here?
Also a prototype thing. When we first started making Mixbus, everybody kept asking us, why don't you make a controller like all these stupid little things? There's a Behringer thing and an Icon thing, and we use these just to test software with. We see Allen and Heath stuff sitting around here. But this we did prototype up, but we never made it. We never made a product out of it, but we made this specifically to control Mixbus. So these are the 16 faders, no faders, but with knobs, and EQ, filters, the whole thing.
Yeah, compressor.
Transport. Sits on your desk. You have a keyboard up underneath there. We prototyped it up and then decided not to make it.
Gotcha.
So it's just something that's, again, a thing that is sitting here. When you develop products, oftentimes they never see the light of day. You see three things here that never saw the light of day. This. You do things and you have an idea and you take it to a certain level, and sometimes it just stops there. Other times you say, you know what, we're going to go for it and we're going to make this thing.
That's what research and development is,
That's
right?
what the R and the D working together kind of get you to that point where you have to say, you got to pull a trigger and you got to say, are we actually going to do this? Or are we going to maybe go do something else, or maybe something else came along that was more interesting than
the R could be radical, we're going forward, and the D could be this is a dud.
Yeah, this is dumb.
Radical and dud. Dumb, yeah.
This is dumb.
Now what we'll do, we'll have Eric film. He can turn this into a still shot for me, so I can fake on my social media that I won some awards of some kind, a tech award for I don't know what.
Well, one of those is for this console.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's
I hope I'm putting the right one in the right spot.
It doesn't really matter. We got into the live sound business in the mid and late 90s in a big way. I did a contract with Shoko, and we custom built 13 totally automated remote control live performance consoles, one for front of house and one for stage. And they were unique in that all of these knobs on here are motorized. You can see this is really
dense.
A really serious engineering project here. So you have a little motor and a shaft encoder and software, and this knob, when you recalled it, they all would go where they're supposed to go. And when you hit the button, all the knobs would change. So this is the EQ. And these knobs would do a full 270-degree rotation in a video frame. That's
wow.
why these motors are so big.
How much does this thing
Careful,
weigh?
it's heavy. It
Oh,
weighs
goodness,
about 15 pounds. So this is one piece that went in the middle of the console, and then you had a bunch of faders, and you hit the button, and then you'd control the EQ. There's only one of these in the console.
so even if it was 32 channels,
Yeah.
there was one of these, and you selected which
The
channel.
console actually had 40 faders, and then you just push the button, and then you control that one. So that was very new. This was they went on tour with these starting in 1999. So we started the project probably in 95. It took about 5 years to from inception to actually going out on the road with it. It took about 5 years to develop that. But it was a one-off thing. We never marketed the product. They had an exclusive on it. But in the end, we won a tech award for it, which was kind of cool.
There you go. Yeah.
They toured with these consoles for about 12 or 15 years. Shoko did. They were on the big stadium Prism system rigs, so they were leapfrogging stuff all
Claire
over.
Brothers.
They ultimately became part of Claire Brothers.
They were doing the biggest of the bigs.
Yeah, they were doing big, just the big stuff. Anywhere where there was 80 or 90,000 people in the stadium.
So you're talking about what about a Live Aid?
Well, yeah, we were involved in it. There was three Harisson consoles at Live Aid.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Up under the stage, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very cool. Great history.
We were big in the live sound, and most of that was, it was bespoke. Those were custom, one-off projects where the customer actually had an exclusive on it, where I couldn't go sell it to somebody else.
Right.
And they paid for that. They wanted it. They wanted it on their own. They didn't want anybody else to have it. And we got the IP. Most interesting part about that is all of the things that we developed and designed, we owned.
Okay.
So
awesome.
they did not buy the IP. They just bought an exclusive right to it.
Gotcha.
And a lot of that technology has gone into everything that we do.
Sure.
As the film consoles move forward, we kind of dovetailed everything we were doing in and across everything that we make here. So
very cool.
So this is kind of a hodgepodge history of what we've been doing for the last 40 years, and it's pretty cool. We've done some really, really interesting stuff. So one point, most everybody here is working remotely to some degree. When Ben is here, he'll sit here. Justin will be in here probably later today. He'll go to Mexican with us here in an hour or so. Mike's here every day. Todd's working at home today. We have guys in Germany and Australia. There's a lot of remote stuff going on.
Yeah.
So, but we have a place for everybody if and when they do want to come here or sit down or need to come in and hang out. So.
Do you have a little shop area where somebody takes parts out of a bin and does some soldering?
We have all the we have all the messy stuff.
Hey, there's people like me that like to see that stuff.
So this is all engineering stuff. These are where the smart guys sit. My office is up there. All the smart guys sit back here. We have a small stock room, and you can go ahead and walk on in there.
This is what I was talking about.
Yeah, a couple of messy benches.
Yeah.
This is Brian. He's been here a long time.
How you doing, Brian?
You're up to like 20 years, aren't you, Brian?
Yeah.
Something like that? 22, 21, 20?
I've been here since 2001.
Yeah, he's been here a long time, so.
That's a long time, but surely you've taken some breaks between.
He goes home we do let him out of the
Okay, so
we do let him out of the cage.
All right, so he's not forced to just sit there for 2 hours. That's good. But this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Yeah. Soldering irons and all that kind of
stuff. Well, we got
stuff.
all the stuff. I mean,
it does happen.
This is where, how it works is a concept comes out of the brain. Maybe I'll sketch something up, have some ideas. You haven't met Todd. Todd's the head of engineering, but I'll bring that to the table and say, hey, I think we should do something like this. And then the mechanical guys and the electronic guys and the design engineers go, you're crazy. What are you thinking? That's never going to work. It's never going to fit. They start
tell you why you're an idiot.
They start telling me why I'm an idiot, and then I tell them, well, that's your job. And eventually we come out with a product, and so it's a real nice, real interesting dynamic. And we've just been doing it a long time. Most everybody's been here. Brian's been here 22 years. Ben and I've worked together for 25 years. Todd, he's not here today, but he's been here, 24 years. We've just all been doing this for a long time, and we make some really nice stuff. So we got a lot of experience, and we bring some really good IP to the table.
Well, I'm sure I'm sure there's some exciting stuff in the works that we're going to be seeing in the next 2 or 3 years.
I can't tell you about any of it.
I know.
But you know, when you look at that console and you look at those 500 series modules, and it doesn't take a huge leap to see where things that we might venture into in the near future. But you know, we also have a huge lot of years of experience with digital signal processing and large format consoles. So this is not out of the question either as we move forward.
Right.
We've done that for a long. That's actually most of what we've done.
This must be the Ben that you mentioned. Ben Loftus, right?
That's
well,
right.
nice to finally meet you.
Nice to meet you, Joe.
So tell us a little bit about your role and history here.
Well, I've been here a paltry 25 years after Gary's 40.
That's a mere quarter of a decade.
He's the new guy.
Yeah.
I started when we were really big into film consoles. So when I came here, these guys had gotten into this operating system that was in Apple between the time when Steve Jobs left Apple and before he came back. There was this thing called BEOS, and I was really into that. It was kind of a cutting edge thing, and these guys were really into it, making these film consoles, and it was an automation system that told all the knobs where to go, you know, during a film.
Is that remote control stuff?
It's the remote control stuff.
Yeah, we were looking at that out here.
Right, and I came in on the digital side. So it was after the analog systems were out in the field already, and we were adapting all those analog systems to digital. And what was cool about that was the board that was sitting in these studios, in these beautiful, you know, multi-million-dollar facilities, stayed exactly the same. So every knob, every EQ knob, the faders, the sends, everything was already in the room. Mm-hmm. And we were going in and retrofitting that analog back end to digital to accommodate all the new digital playback systems and low noise and all the things they wanted. Mm-hmm. So what that meant was those digital boards had to sound exactly the same, because one day this film mixer is going in, 3 people, music, dialogue, and effects are going in, and they're turning knobs and it works one way. And then we ripped out the whole analog thing and put in a digital thing, and then they would come in and do the next movie.
And
right?
they were adamant about that.
And they were adamant. It had to sound the same.
From Friday to Monday.
Yeah.
It just had to sound the same.
Yeah.
They just wanted it digital. They didn't want it digital and sound different. Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
it had to be the same, because their workflow was already established. This is a really important point about that. Anyway.
Yeah, so we had the physical board stayed in there, and there was an ancient automation system that ran on Apple computers that we were replacing. So I came on board to rewrite the graphics and all the automation systems, and there was a team of us. I wasn't the only guy. There was a team of us that came in to rewrite all that automation system to go with the new digital backend and replace those analog boards with digital ones. So that's where I came in. And being a software guy, I was a little bit more on I came into this business not totally understanding the enterprise class nature of this. I mean, $1 million consoles and big business and Sony and Universal Studios and, you know, Mosfilm in Russia and, I mean, just all over the world, you know, huge things that were like a little bit out of my league. So I was always more in the consumer side, always thinking about, why isn't there just a USB plug on this thing somewhere, you know?
Right.
So one of the things that we started getting into, Gary and I had an innovation that we actually were awarded a patent on, which was a waveform display. And I think you can probably fly something up on the screen right here, but there was a waveform display that went at the top of the console. It showed all your meters and it showed your EQ curve and it showed your gate and compressor and everything. But it also showed a little scrolling waveform. And what we were going after is we were looking at Pro Tools. And we knew Pro Tools was up and coming thing. And one of the things they loved about Pro Tools, the mixers loved, is they could see on those waveforms, like if a door slam was coming, they could see that approaching, and they could get their fingers on the right fader and ride that sound, right? So what we did is we captured the sound as the Pro Tools played it the first time, and we replayed just the waveforms up above the screen so you could see that door slam coming up with the fader, right? So it was kind of a precursor to, we were in this world where the DAW was still the editor and we were still purely the mixer, but the writing was on the wall, like they expected those kind of things. So that was our step towards DAW land. We also did some things to keep up with them in the sense that we made these digital boards that were all based on Shark processors. And you had these, you may be familiar with like Universal Audio makes these cards that go in your computer and they have like 2 Sharks or 4 Sharks. A typical console had Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I mean, not kidding. We had, Gary could bring you a board. I mean, a single board had 4 or 8.
6, 8, 12, 16 of them.
Had 16 sharks on the one board, and then you had this rack. I mean, it was floor to ceiling. You know, like 2 or 3 of these floor to ceiling racks where these things slid in there. Each was 16. It was a massive, massive system. But computers were just speeding up at exponential rates. So we developed this thing called the X engine, which was a native computer that took the audio in over Ethernet, processed it, and kicked it back out in just a couple of samples latency. Oh, and we were also making these plugins for the film guys. So we were making de-essers and denoisers and things that the film guys needed. And honestly, we started looking at all those pieces like, well, we got these waveform displays, you know, we got this native processing on a computer that does all this bus summing and everything. And we really had all the parts to make a DAW. What we didn't have was like the editing. So we partnered, this was where it went cool and weird and really interesting. I mean, this is what really differentiates Mixbus, in my opinion, and makes it kind of special, is instead of launching another DAW, because there were already, dozens on the scene, and there's been a dozen launched since then, we partnered up with this open source community that made this editor. A lot of interesting stories, behind the creators of that software, Paul Davis and all of his friends. He was the first employee at Amazon.com. We could talk all day about it, but our side of the story is he wanted to have some plugins in there, some EQs, and that kind of thing. He wanted a branded EQ, like a Harisson EQ in there. So we made a little EQ because we had all those technologies sitting around. And honestly, we just said, man, this just doesn't feel like mixing. This popping up a plug-in window all the time and turning the knobs on screen, you're only looking at one thing at a time. That's not mixing. Mixing is this. Mixing is, okay, I'm going to cut a little bit on this guitar so I can boost a little bit over on this acoustic, and then that means I'm going to have to make a little bit of space. I'm going to pan this a little to the side, and I'll pan that one back. Right? It's in context. Like you're doing, the whole point of mixing is not making one sound good, right? When you sit down at this, you're trying to make all these sounds have a space for each other. And so to have this layout where you can just a little extra there and a little more there, that's mixing. So when we saw that, we saw an opening. Even though there were already a lot of DAWs out there, there was like something isn't being done right. So we launched a software product where we basically make a little 500 module that goes in the slot above the channel strip. So you got the typical fader, and then you can have a slot where you put an EQ or a gate or a compressor, and then we have our send knobs. So if I have a tall screen, if I have a 4K monitor, I made this kind of low res so it would show up on camera. But if we were using this as a 4K screen, you'd have a lot of height here, and you can actually put all the elements of a channel strip right in front of you like a real console. Oh. So this feels like mixing. So what we're doing with the new version 10, is we're taking it to the next level. So our EQ, the 32C EQ that appears here and in all the plugins and the 500 modules and things, that's been kind of a hallmark of our Mixbus system, is that we have our EQ in the channel strip. Mm-hmm. Okay, but for version 10, we now have these partners at SSL.
Right.
Yeah, so you can now choose an SSL EQ in those channel strips in our upcoming software. I can't say too much about it because this hasn't been released yet. There'll be 3 tiers of this software, and that will be available in one of the tiers. You can guess which one, probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Similarly, in that top tier, we've added Dolby Atmos immersive surround mixing, and we've done it our way. So we've got an object-based mixer. Let's see if I can get something rolling here. Yeah. So we've got objects that you can fly around, and this is all done in the channel strip. So you see it in context, just like you can see the EQ in context. You can see the objects that you're moving around in this 3D immersive space. And then they all land over here in the Dolby Atmos master bus. And you see the surround speakers. You can see the surround speaker playback. And then when I stop playback, it reports to you the LUFS loudness and the DBTP. Big deal. Again, you don't have to open any windows. You don't have to pop up anything. It's literally all done here in the mixer window. We have a master bus with loudness metering. This is the stereo bus. This is the surround bus. Then we have your monitor bus where you have your speaker volume. You can add plugins just to your playback system. So it's very, very full featured. And because it's a DAW, of course, you have full featured cut, copy, paste, import, export, editing, MIDI. Let's see, there are some MIDI tracks. Kind of a newish feature for us is the Lollipop velocity editing. And we have a clip launching feature, very similar to Ableton Live. So you can trigger clips. So this is a complete full-featured DAW with the addition of our EQ, firstly our mixer, and then the SSL EQ now in Dolby Atmos. So it's going to be a complete solution for really, it's going to be a Swiss Army knife for like audio guys. Mm-hmm. If you're going to show up and need to record a show, this is the tool. If you need to fly in some loops and to start your show, this is your tool. If you want to take those tracks home and edit them, this is going to be your tool. And then if you want to publish that mix to your immersive mix, to a distributor and make the immersive mix, this is going to be your tool. I mean, it's like soup to nuts, the whole thing.
Very cool.
So that's Mixbus. That's my baby. I've spent a tremendous amount of time. We started this in about 2009, and we've launched. This will be version 10. And we had a suite of plugins that went along with that. And we have taken most of those plugins now and made those available in any DAW. So you can go to Harisson's website and you'll find those plugins. Many of those started from our digital film console days. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we really focused on cleaning up your sounds. The first thing you have to do is have great tracks if you're going to make a great mix. So we started off with de-essers, denoisers, those kinds of things. Once Mixbus came out and we started focusing a little more on music, we started adding some more artistic tools, some phasers and auto panners and trim, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's all in there now. There's a guitar tune. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Guitar tuners, all kinds of metering, all kinds of EQs, compressors, gates, reverb, delay. It's all in there.
And you can just lay it out in whatever form, like your aux returns, for example.
Well, one of the things that we do differently than everybody else, your input channel's on the left, just like a regular console, right? And then each of these input channels has 8 stereo subgroup sends, that's these white knobs, and then 4 additional effects sends, so this is basically a matrix. You have 8 subgroups, and then it goes into 4 final stereo buses. So these are the input channels. Those feed over to the buses where we have dedicated tape drive saturation.
That's awesome.
Yep. You can add plugins, of course, to any of the input channels or to these buses. All the buses feed down to the master bus where you have really great metering, some additional tape drive, EQ. And so it's console style. You literally turn the knob instead of making a bus.
And you might notice the similarity to what you see sitting here to what's on that screen.
Yeah.
And this is what we bring to the DAW world, is that mixing,
knowledge.
that mixing format knowledge, busing structure, mixing workflow to the DAW world.
That's very cool. I gotta confess, I have never used it. I know of a couple very loyal guys that have been doing it for years that rave about it. So you're doing something right. You've definitely got some very dedicated fans that left other well-known DAWs to do their mixing within this platform. One of these days, I'll have to give it a spin.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
It's been very under the radar. My expectation is that with SSL's help, it won't be under the radar anymore.
Well, yeah, that they have a lot of muscle they can bring to the table. That's very cool. Well, you've done great work, man. Ben, pleasure to meet you. Thank you for showing us your baby.
Excellent, Joe. Thanks.
Well, thanks so much for having us out, Gary. It'd be great to see you again.
My pleasure.
And I think this is going to be interesting for a lot of our followers and friends, because I have to confess, I was one of those guys that knew Harisson dominated and was a big deal in the market, and then wasn't. And I remember when the Harisson Mixbus came out, I assumed that somebody else was bringing back that name, and come to find out, you and SSL just kind of went different directions.
Yeah.
But you never went away. You
never went away.
Yeah,
been here the whole time. So
well, and that said, I mean, you're new. You're back in a huge, impressive way. So many cutting edge features. I was really impressed with the fact that you have a volume knob that is Atmos ready, immersive ready.
Yeah.
I mean that to me is it's cutting edge.
Very soon it will be in the DAW, like you saw with Ben. And, that's nothing new for us. When Atmos was first a thing a decade ago, the Dolby guys came to us. We had all the film consoles out there, and we had to make a 64 wide monitoring system for that, and control that original rendering unit. So we worked very closely with Dolby before they ever even launched.
See, that makes sense, because we in the music community are just kind of catching up to where people that were doing a lot of film industry stuff already were.
Yeah, it's taken a decade for that technology to filter its way through most of the industry now, and it started in Hollywood, and for a reason.
That's where
they
you
needed
were.
content, and that's where we were. We just happened to be there. So integrating that into the DAW, integrating some of those concepts into a new console for the music thing was a natural thing. It was something we've been doing for quite a long time. So nothing new, but new to the music guys, and that's cool. We're happy to bring all of our knowledge and resource to an industry that really needs it and really wants to embrace it, and needs people who really understand how that stuff works.
Well, Gary, I tell you what, I'm getting hungry, and I know you mentioned that around this time you generally go to a Mexican restaurant down the street that's quite good.
Every Wednesday for the last 25 years.
Well, what if we wrap this up and go have lunch?
You're more than welcome to join us.
All right. That said, I know a lot of our followers, probably like me, we know the Harisson legacy to a point. I think maybe some of them didn't know about Michael Jackson records and all that kind of great stuff. Just went under the radar for a little while, and what kind of things you guys were working on. So it's interesting to see that you were kind of branching off and doing big things in the film world. And I got a feeling that some of this, what seems to be cutting edge technology to me, like using a monitor pot that is capable of handling immersive audio, is probably not really that cutting edge for you. Because we're kind of, us in the music side, are sometimes a little slow to adopt other things that I'm assuming you were.
Yeah, we were deep in it. When Dolby, before they actually launched Atmos, they came to us, and we had all these consoles out in LA, and they needed content. And they needed the systems out there to be able to monitor 64 wide monitoring and control their original rendering unit. And we had these motorized joysticks and a lot of technology. And we did that, and we worked very closely with them, and that was 10 or 12 years ago.
So you guys were doing all that stuff before
we were doing it long before the music industry decided that immersive and Atmos was going to be a thing. We'd already been down that road. So putting that in this console really was just something we just did. We had it, we knew what to do, and we just put it in there. It's the rendering stuff and how that works in our DAW coming here very soon is also part of that. We've really already been down that road, so we have a real good idea of workflows and what people need to do and how they need to do it. So, that's kind of what we were doing in between. And now it's the fruits of that are making their way into the music side, which is exactly where we want to be. So,
exactly. I'm excited about the new SSL partnership. I think that's going to hold such great things for both companies, which means it's going to hold a lot of great things for us. So there's going to be a lot of great products to come out of it. And one thing I noticed while we were out of the room, somebody pulled up a multi-track that just happens to be Thriller.
The beginning of Thriller.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that the significance of having Thriller playback through a Harisson console in your demo room is the fact that it was recorded on a Harisson console.
Recorded and mixed. Off the wall, Thriller, Bad, all three of them right in a row. In the early 80s, Bruce Swedien did those records with Quincy, and it's a big deal. So we have those tracks, and we like to show that.
One of these days, I'm going to come back. just to get my hand.
Just to do it. And you can moonwalk across.
Well, I can't moonwalk, but I can. I'll do whatever I can. So, but anyway, thanks for having us come out. So let's do
pleasure,
this,
man. Anytime.
Let's do this Mexican restaurant thing.
We'll do it.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks all.